What happens when someone crosses a royal line that was never meant to be crossed? What happens when a person who once stood on the world stage as a duchess, celebrated, photographed, applauded, decides to show up uninvited to one of the monarchy's most sacred nights, believing she can force her way back into a world determined to shut her out? That's the question the world didn't know it was about to witness in real time. Because on the cold, glittering November evening of the Royal Variety Performance 2025, an event where tradition rules every inch of the velvet carpet, Meghan Markle appeared where she had absolutely no place being, and Prince William didn't hesitate, not even for a second. He looked at her with a calmness that could only come from years of quiet storms, from decades of knowing how to keep composure in public, and he uttered a single word that would ricochet around the world within minutes. Get out. 3 syllables, delivered like a verdict. And just like that, a moment meant to celebrate talent, charity, and royal unity was transformed into a public rupture that no one in the room would forget. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But before we dive into that confrontation, the stare, the silence, the shock, let's step back for a second. Because this wasn't just a random occurrence. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a scheduling mix-up or an oops, I thought I was invited moment. No. This was the result of years of tension, rumors, broken relationships, and silent warnings that were ignored again and again. It was the result of a delicate royal ecosystem finally snapping under pressure. And if we're being honest, it was the moment people had long predicted might happen someday. They just didn't expect it to unfold at one of the most prestigious royal events of the year, in front of cameras, aristocrats, actors, executives, security, and a stunned public who couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. Picture it, London at its most theatrical, the streets glowing with holiday lights, crowds gathering outside the Royal Albert Hall, breath crystallizing in the winter air as fans waited to see who would arrive. Inside, the atmosphere hummed with expectations. Performers rehearsing their last notes, orchestras tuning their instruments, hosts double-checking their scripts. This wasn't just another event. It was a symbol of British cultural pride, a royal tradition upheld for nearly a century, and in 2025 it carried even more weight because of King Charles's ongoing health battles. With the monarch stepping back from many public duties, Prince William was taking the lead more often, embodying the future of the crown in ways that no one had anticipated happening so quickly. For many attendees, this night wasn't just about entertainment. It was about seeing William step into a role the world knew he would one day own. But what no one in that grand hall knew, what no one in the global audience watching at home could possibly predict, was that someone else had plans for the evening. Plans that didn't include permission, protocol, or respect for boundaries. Plans that involved slipping into the event like a disruptor. Plans that would collide head-on with William's patience, duty, and personal limits. Before Meghan even arrived, something was already off. Insiders would later say that the day had felt strangely tense, as if the air carried a warning. William's team was unusually focused, his security unusually alert, his briefings unusually long. Several aides were seen exchanging whispers in corners, checking devices, rewriting seating charts. And then, just hours before the event, a phone call came through, one that immediately altered the tone of the entire evening. The moment William took that call, his demeanor shifted. Not outwardly, of course. He didn't panic or frown or show anger. But those closest to him knew the signs. The slight tightening of his jaw, the stillness in his shoulders, the way he removed his cufflinks and put them back on again, a habit he had whenever something serious was unfolding. And although no one knew what was said on the other end of that line, not yet, those watching him knew it wasn't good. A warning, an alert, a heads-up from someone who knew something big was coming. That's when William's first quiet order was given: double the perimeter. No explanation, no questions. His team complied instantly. Additional security moved into place. Cameras were shifted. Entrance protocols were tightened. And just like that, long before the doors opened to guests, the atmosphere transformed from celebratory to controlled, guarded, anticipatory. Now here's where things get interesting, and where the contradictions begin stacking up like cards in a house ready to fall. On the one hand, Meghan had insisted for years that she wanted nothing to do with the royal family. She claimed she had escaped toxicity, stepped away for peace, and moved on. She positioned herself as someone who didn't need the monarchy, didn't want the monarchy, didn't even respect the monarchy. But on the other hand, here she was, pulling up to the royal variety performance without an invitation, without clearance, without acknowledgement, and acting as if she still had the right to step foot on that red carpet. The contradiction could not have been louder. And the crowd outside didn't know what to make of it at first. Cameras flashed, people murmured, and whispers rose like a wave as soon as her figure stepped out of the sleek black car. She wasn't dressed casually or discreetly. No, she was dressed to be seen, to be photographed, to dominate attention. But even stranger, she wasn't alone. That's when heads really turned. A man stepped out first. Not immediately recognizable, but clearly someone close to her, someone who moved with purpose, someone who seemed to be there for more than just moral support. Whatever this was, it was planned, coordinated, strategic. And for those watching, it felt less like a surprise visit and more like a move in a long-running chess match. Inside the hall, William received the alert at the exact moment Meghan's heels touched the pavement outside. The message was delivered from security to aide to private secretary with silent urgency until it finally reached him. He read it, blinked once, then looked up toward the doors as if he could see her through walls. She's here. Those two words, spoken quietly by an aide, carried enough weight to set the entire night on a dangerous course. Because for William, this wasn't just about an uninvited guest. This wasn't even just about Meghan's history of defiance. This was about protecting an institution, protecting his father's legacy, protecting the future of the monarchy, and protecting his family from chaos that had dragged on long enough. The moment Meghan walked through the doors, she entered a space governed by rules she had rejected, boundaries she had broken, and titles she no longer held. And yet, she walked with confidence. Chin high, shoulders back, eyes scanning the room as if searching for the one person she came to disrupt. The first layer of shock rippled through the guests gathered in the lobby. A few gasped. A few whispered her name. A few lifted their phones despite immediate warnings from security. And yet Meghan continued forward, unfazed by the disturbance she caused. She seemed to be looking for someone specific. She found him. Across the hall, William stood with two aides beside him, his posture royal, composed, and unshakably calm. But make no mistake, there was tension in the air so sharp it could have cut glass. Because when William saw her, his expression didn't soften, it didn't smile, it didn't welcome. It hardened, just slightly. Enough for those paying attention to feel the shift. Enough for the cameras, already clicking in the background, to capture the moment history pivoted. The distance between them was small. The emotional distance? An ocean. And the world would soon hear every detail of what happened next. But there's something important to understand before we get there. This wasn't just a confrontation about an event. This wasn't about seating charts or dress codes or last-minute appearances. This was the culmination of years of tension, confusion, betrayal, and silence. Everyone expected the cracks between them might show eventually. They didn't expect the explosion to happen here. But before William said that now-famous line, before security moved, before the guests froze in shocked silence, Meghan said something first. Something so bold, so calculated, so piercing that William's entire expression changed. And that is the moment everything shifted. Because what Meghan said was not an apology, not a greeting, not an explanation. It was something else entirely. Something that made William step forward. Something that made security tense. Something that would lead to the clash the world is still talking about. Something that would make him say the one phrase no one ever expected to hear from a future king in public. But to understand that moment fully, to understand how the night spiraled into shouting, cameras, security intervention, and global headlines, we need to go back to the beginning. To the phone call, to the warning, to the decision William made hours earlier. Because the truth is, this confrontation didn't start when Meghan walked through the doors. It started long before that. And what happened next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What did Meghan say in that moment? The moment that made William's entire expression shift. The moment that made security stiffen. The moment that made an entire royal event freeze, as if the crown itself was holding its breath. Before we get to the exact sentence, let's rewind just 2 hours earlier, because that's when the real collision course began. And the question you have to ask yourself, the question I want you to hold in your mind as we move through this next chapter, is this. How does someone know exactly when to show up uninvited unless they're relying on inside information? And if they're relying on inside information, who gave it to them? The night didn't begin with chaos. It began with murmurs. It began with an atmosphere too calm, too polished, too ideal. You know that kind of calm. The kind you only recognize later was actually a warning. The hall was buzzing but balanced, energized but orderly. Everyone assumed the night would follow royal tradition. A glamorous arrival, smiling photographs, performers dazzling the audience, William stepping up to honor his father's legacy by representing the monarchy with dignity. That's what everyone expected. Everyone except William. Because even before he received that mysterious phone call, something in him felt uneasy, as if a shadow had slipped across his intuition. Do you ever get that feeling? That unsettling moment when everything appears perfect on the outside, but something deep inside tells you the floorboards beneath you are about to shift? Earlier that afternoon, William had been finalizing his briefings with his private secretary. They were going over the seating arrangements, the charity updates, the list of performers, and the schedule his father would have ordinarily followed if Charles's health had allowed him to attend. Things were running smoothly, maybe too smoothly. It was during one of these final discussions that an aide approached, not hurriedly, not panicked, but with a quiet tension that immediately caught William's attention. The aide didn't speak at first. He simply handed William a phone and said, "Sir, you may want to take this privately." Those words alone were enough to darken the air around them. So William stepped into a side room, away from the soft chatter of preparations. He closed the door. He pressed the phone to his ear. He listened. And according to multiple insiders who later confirmed parts of the exchange, the first words he heard were enough to shift the entire direction of the night. "Sir, she's coming." No introduction. No explanation. No details needed. William knew exactly who. And that's what made the blood drain from his face. Not in fear, but in deep, controlled frustration. Meghan. Not invited. Not acknowledged. Not expected. But coming anyway. Here's where things twist. The voice on the phone didn't simply warn him about her arrival. It hinted at something bigger. Something orchestrated. Something she wasn't doing alone. "Sir, there are indications she plans to make an appearance with a guest. We believe she intends to enter the event." That last sentence was delivered slowly, carefully, as if the speaker knew each word was a stone dropped into a still pond. William closed his eyes. You can imagine the thoughts running through him in that moment. The exhaustion of years of conflict. The pressure of stepping into his father's role sooner than expected. The frustration of headlines twisting every royal move. The responsibility to maintain dignity in circumstances that seemed determined to provoke him. And now this, an uninvited appearance at one of the most watched royal events of the year. He didn't shout. He didn't sigh. He didn't panic. He simply asked one question, the one question that revealed everything. "How sure are you?" The voice replied, "Certain enough that we thought you should be prepared." That was it. That was the moment William realized the night would not unfold as planned. And instead of reacting emotionally, he reacted strategically. Because when you carry the weight of the monarchy on your shoulders, emotional reactions are a luxury you cannot afford. He handed the phone back, dismissed the aide, and returned to the main hall. But everything had changed. His team sensed it instantly. They saw the way he stood a little straighter. The way he looked at the entrances. The way he chose his words more carefully. William didn't need to announce the shift. His presence did it for him. This is the moment when he quietly instructed his staff to strengthen security around the perimeter. No announcement. No drama. Just subtle, decisive movements. If Meghan was coming, he wouldn't be caught off guard. If she planned something unexpected, he wouldn't allow her to disrupt the night. And if she wanted a confrontation, he would not let it happen on her terms. But here's the contradiction I want you to consider. If Meghan truly wanted nothing to do with the royal family, if she had truly severed ties, truly closed that chapter, why would she show up here of all places? Why would she attempt to enter a royal performance that she had no role in, no reason to attend, and no invitation for? The contradiction is striking, isn't it? On the surface, she wanted independence. But beneath the surface? Her actions kept pulling her back into royal orbit, as if she couldn't decide whether she wanted distance or dominance. And while William was preparing himself for an unpredictable encounter, Meghan was on the opposite side of London making a decision that would alter the story of the night, and perhaps the future of the royal narrative. Her arrival was not casual. It was calculated, her clothing meticulously chosen, her expression carefully crafted, her companion positioned like a silent chess piece, and the timing? Perfectly aligned to disrupt the early arrivals without blending into the crowd. When her car finally pulled up, the street changed instantly. The fans outside didn't know whether to cheer, whisper, or step back. The press didn't know whether to grab footage or freeze in confusion. Even the security outside hesitated for a moment, unsure whether what they were seeing was staged or real. Meanwhile, inside the hall, William received the notification, "She's here." 2 words that ignited a storm. From the moment Meghan stepped onto the pavement, she had a mission. She was scanning faces, looking for supporters, looking for cameras, looking for someone specific. But perhaps the most revealing part was her posture. Confident, almost regal, despite having no royal place in the event. But here's where the tension truly erupted. William didn't wait. He didn't hide in a side room. He didn't allow rumors to spread before confronting the situation. Instead, he walked directly toward the entrance, his stride steady, his expression unreadable. Guests felt the energy shift. Conversations faded. A ripple of anticipation moved through the hall like a breeze before a storm. And when William appeared at the top of the lobby stairs, the entire room knew something was wrong. And when Meghan stepped inside, stopping just meters away from him, the air between them went heavy and sharp. That's when she said it. The sentence that made William's eyes narrow. The sentence that stiffened the backbone of every security officer in the room. The sentence that set the tone for the confrontation that followed. "You didn't think you could do this without me, did you?" A line loaded with implication. A line dripping with entitlement. A line that suggested she believed she still had a place in this world, even after walking away from it. And the moment that sentence passed her lips, William understood exactly why she had come. Not for reconciliation, not for peace, not even for attention alone. She came to reclaim power she no longer held. But here's the question I'll pose to you. What kind of person shows up uninvited to a royal event and speaks as if they still belong there? What reality were they living in? What message were they trying to send? And who, behind the scenes, was encouraging them? Because make no mistake, Meghan did not come that night to observe. She came to challenge, to provoke, to test the boundaries that William, after years of patience, was finally prepared to enforce. And William, hearing those words, took one step closer, not aggressive, not hostile, but firm. Protecting duty, protecting dignity, protecting the night, protecting the monarchy. But what he said next, that's what would ignite the clash heard around the world. And what happens after that moment? That's where this story truly explodes. Because what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What do you think William said in response to Meghan's loaded accusation? Her line dripping with implication, ego, and a bizarre sense of entitlement. What do you say to someone who shows up where they don't belong, pretends they still have authority they gave away, and then demands relevance in a world they publicly rejected? Do you stay silent? Do you entertain them? Do you call security immediately? Or do you simply look them dead in the eye and tell them the truth they didn't want to hear? That's exactly the dilemma that flashed across William's face in that second. Just 1 second before he replied. But before we get to his exact response, we need to understand what was really happening inside him at that moment. Because this wasn't just about annoyance or irritation. This wasn't about embarrassment or inconvenience. This was about something deeper, something personal, something years in the making. Think about it. For nearly a decade, William had carried the burden of trying to maintain stability while the world dissected his family again and again. Every interview, every podcast, every documentary, every exclusive leak, every accusation thrown at the royals, no matter how distorted, exaggerated, or strategically framed, landed on his shoulders because he was next in line to protect the institution. And through it all, he had remained silent. He had remained composed. He had remained dignified. But on this night, as Meghan confronted him in a sacred space she had no business entering, Years of unspoken tension tightened inside him like a coiled spring. And Meghan knew it. You could see it in her expression, an almost triumphant glint, as if she believed she had cornered him emotionally, as if she thought she had the upper hand, as if she truly believed he needed her presence to validate the evening. That was the tragic irony. She had convinced herself she still held influence over a world that had already moved on. The audience around them didn't know what to do. Some stared in disbelief. Others had the instinct to back away, as if the energy around the two of them had become volatile. A pair of performers, still holding their rehearsal folders, froze mid-step as if witnessing something forbidden. A few guests glanced toward the exits, unsure whether this confrontation would escalate into something public, something disastrous, something the press could weaponize within minutes. And the press, those few unauthorized photographers who had managed to sneak glimpses from outside, were already snapping frantically through the glass as if capturing history in real time. But in the center of it all, William did not flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back. He simply held Meghan's gaze in a way that told everyone watching he was done being manipulated, provoked, or emotionally ambushed by someone who thrived on drama. His reply came out low, calm, and devastatingly firm. "This has nothing to do with you." 6 words, delivered like a hammer on marble. And if you were watching closely, you would have seen the flicker, just a flicker, of shock ripple across Meghan's face. Because she expected confrontation. She expected tension. She expected emotional reaction. What she didn't expect was total dismissal. Not anger, not panic, not defensiveness. Just absolute clarity that she was irrelevant to the moment she was trying to invade. But here's the twist. Meghan didn't step back. She stepped closer. You could almost hear the entire lobby inhale. Her companion shifted behind her as if preparing for something. The aides near William instinctively moved half a step forward. Security repositioned themselves, not aggressively, but protectively, like a silent wall ready to close if necessary. And in that moment, the entire mood changed. Not because of the words exchanged, but because Meghan refused to read the room. She didn't register boundaries. She didn't acknowledge protocol. She didn't recognize that her presence wasn't disrupting a family gathering. It was disrupting an institution. With a half smile, one of those smiles that masks insecurity with defiance, she leaned in slightly and said, "I have every right to be here. You know that. But here's the question, did she? Really? What right was she referring to? Her former title? Her past role? Her connection through marriage? Or was it something else, something rooted in a delusion of relevance, a belief that she still held influence in a space she had walked away from?" William's jaw tightened, but not with anger, with resolve. "No," he answered quietly. "You don't." And that right there, that quiet contradiction, hit Meghan harder than any loud command ever could. Because the truth was undeniable. She had left. She had separated. She had chosen independence over royal life. And yet here she was, demanding access to a world she had burned bridges with. The contradiction wasn't just visible. It was blinding. Guests were still frozen in place, torn between fascination and discomfort. One actress near the entrance whispered to her husband, "This can't be happening." Another clutched her clutch bag nervously, unsure whether the confrontation was about to escalate into something catastrophic. William's team exchanged tense glances, wondering whether they should intervene or allow him to handle it himself. But here's a crucial detail. William did not raise his voice. Not once. Because the power in this moment wasn't in volume. It was in composure. He was the future king. He didn't need theatrics. He didn't need cameras. He didn't need applause. His authority didn't come from drama. It came from his presence. Meghan, on the other hand, thrived on spectacle. She gestured around the hall, voice rising just enough for a small crowd to hear, and said, "This is a public event. I'm here to support the performers. What's the problem with that?" But everyone knew the problem. It wasn't about public access. It wasn't about performers. It wasn't about charity. It was about intention. It was about timing. It was about intrusion. And most of all, it was about the message her presence sent. Meghan wasn't there to support the arts. She wasn't there to celebrate tradition. She was there to disrupt, to challenge, to assert relevance. That's when William gave a subtle signal to security. You'd miss it if you blinked. A small shift of his hand, a minute tilt of his head, Not aggressive, not dramatic, just enough for trained professionals to understand. Be ready. And Meghan saw it. Her eyes narrowed. She said sharply, "Don't you dare treat me like some outsider." And that was the moment everything snapped. Because she wasn't some outsider. She was an outsider. One by choice. One by her own public declarations. One by her own distancing. One by her own decisions. The crowd sensed the moment tipping towards something irreversible. William's voice remained steady, unwavering. "You made your decision years ago. You walked away. Tonight doesn't change that." Meghan stiffened. Her companion shifted again, as if ready to intervene. Security took one more small step inward, and the guests closest to the confrontation edged back, creating just enough space to make the tension even more visible. Then Meghan tried a different tactic, emotion. She leaned her head slightly, softening her voice in a way she had used successfully in interviews and high-profile appearances. "You don't have to do this," she said. "You don't have to act like I'm the enemy." It was strategic. It was intentional. It was meant to reframe the situation. But William didn't fall for it. "We're not enemies," he said, tone neutral. "We're also not connected anymore. And tonight is not about you. It's about the charity, the performers, the crown, and my father." A direct reminder. A painful one. A necessary one. Meghan blinked hard, as if the mention of Charles struck a nerve she wasn't expecting. And for a split second, her facade faltered. But then, just as quickly, she rebuilt it. She lifted her chin and replied, "You cannot keep pretending I don't matter." William's response. A quiet, devastating contradiction. "You're the one pretending." Silence. Heavy. Electric. Unmistakable. And that's when Meghan lost the upper hand. Her breath hitched. Her eyes darted to the watching crowd. Her companion stepped forward as if to shield her. And security, interpreting that movement as potential escalation, edged in with precision. One wrong step. One wrong word. One wrong gesture. It would all spiral. And that's when it happened. Meghan raised her voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can't stop me from going inside." A crackle of shock spread across the lobby. William exhaled slowly. "Watch me." He nodded once. Security moved. Not to grab. Not to drag. But to block. A human wall. Trained. Unshakable. Unbending. Meghan stared at them in disbelief. Her companion's jaw clenched. Gasps echoed around the hall. And William, standing tall, calm, resolute, took one firm step forward. What he said next would ignite the true explosion of the night. But we're not there yet. Because before that moment unfolded, something unexpected happened. Something that blindsided even William. A voice from behind Meghan said, "Let her through." Everyone turned. And when they saw who said it, the entire room froze. Who said it? Who was the voice behind Meghan? The voice that cut through the tension like a blade. The voice that made every head snap around. The voice that froze an entire royal lobby in mid-breath. Because this was not a voice that blended in. This was not a voice you could ignore. This was a voice that carried history, weight, authority, recognition. And for a split second, even William's composure flickered. Not in fear. William wasn't afraid of anyone in that room. But in shock. In disbelief. In the dawning realization that tonight's chaos wasn't just unexpected, it was orchestrated on a level no one had predicted. The crowd parted instinctively, the way people do when they sense someone important stepping forward. Security tensed, but didn't move. Their training required them to wait until they could visually assess the situation. William's aides leaned in, desperate to see who had spoken. Meghan turned her head with a triumphant half-smile, because she already knew. She knew exactly who had followed her in. She knew exactly what this would look like. She had planned it. And then the figure emerged from the cluster of startled guests. Harry. Prince Harry. Hair slightly disheveled, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the room with a mix of resolve and annoyance. As if he had been forced into an arena he had spent years trying to escape, but somehow couldn't resist returning to. He stepped out from behind the stunned gathering with the kind of confidence that could be mistaken for authority, even though the authority he once wielded had long been fractured. And the room exploded, not with sound, but with silence so sharp it felt like a collective gasp held hostage inside 1,000 throats. Harry, at the Royal Variety performance. Uninvited, unannounced, unacknowledged. and undeniably aligned with Meghan in a moment that was about to become one of the most talked-about public confrontations in modern royal history. But let's pause here for a moment and ask the question anyone watching would have asked. Why? Why would Harry show up here? Why would he choose this event, this night, this fragile moment in his father's health and in William's rising public responsibilities to appear? Was this loyalty to Meghan? Was this defiance against William? Was this desperation? Was this strategy? Or was it all of the above, wrapped in a mess of old resentment, misguided loyalty, and impulsive judgment? Harry stepped closer, his gaze locked on William. Not soft, not brotherly, but challenging, as if he had something to prove, something to defend, something to reclaim. And what did Meghan do? She stepped aside slightly, allowing Harry to take center space, not by accident, but by design. It was the choreography of a power play. She wanted the world to see that she wasn't alone, that she had support, that she had backup, that this wasn't just Meghan versus the monarchy. It was Meghan and Harry versus William. And the symbolism was suffocating. Harry cleared his throat and repeated, more firmly this time, "I said let her through." A direct order, delivered not to William, but to William's security team, as if Harry still believed he had the authority to command royal protection officers. As if he assumed his voice alone could override the protocols he no longer lived under. But here's the twist. Royal security is not loyal to personalities. It is loyal to positions, to hierarchy, to the crown. And the moment Harry barked that command, they didn't move an inch. Not one. Instead, they turned their gaze to William, waiting for his signal, because his authority was the only one that mattered. And that's when Harry realized the power dynamics had changed. He wasn't in control. He wasn't respected in the hierarchy. He wasn't the prince giving orders anymore. William was. William didn't break eye contact with Harry. He didn't take a step back. He didn't react emotionally. Instead, he said quietly and devastatingly, "This is not your decision." Harry inhaled sharply, his jaw tense. "She's here to support the performers. That's all." William tilted his head slightly, not buying a single word. "She's here to cause a scene." Meghan's face tightened at that accusation. Because truth has a way of hitting harder than insults. Harry glanced at Meghan, then back at William. "You don't get to shut her out." William replied. "She shut herself out." The contradiction between their perspectives snapped in the air like static. The brothers were now standing face to face, only a few meters apart, in a room filled with frozen spectators. This wasn't the warm, affectionate duo from the Diana years. This wasn't the pair who grew up navigating grief, media pressure, and public scrutiny together. This was two men on opposite sides of a fracture that time and choices had widened into a chasm. Meghan, sensing that William was still in control of the room, stepped forward again. "You can't pretend we don't matter anymore." William didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Harry. "You don't matter here." That line wasn't cruel. It wasn't spiteful. It was factual, objective, direct. And it hit both of them like a blow. Harry's shoulders stiffened. Meghan's mouth parted as if she might respond again, but William wasn't done. "This event," he said, voice low, "is for the crown, for the country, for charity, for my father, not for drama." The word drama cut deeper than any insult could have. Harry's eyes narrowed. Meghan's jaw clenched, and the tension around them swelled. Then Harry stepped even closer. "What, exactly," he said in a low voice dripping with bitterness, "are you going to do, William? Throw her out. Throw me out. And this right here, is where the emotional stakes hit their breaking point." Because Harry wasn't just speaking as a husband defending his wife. He was speaking as a brother bitterly aware of the gulf that had grown between them. Speaking as a man caught between loyalty and isolation. Speaking as someone who had once stood beside William at every major moment of their lives, and now stood in opposition to him. William didn't flinch, not even slightly. "If you force me to," he replied evenly, "I will." A ripple of disbelief traveled through the lobby. Even the security team, highly trained and expressionless, shifted almost imperceptibly. Because the idea of William ordering his own brother out of a royal event was unthinkable, unprecedented. A sign that the private fracture between them had finally erupted into public view. Harry blinked slowly, as if processing whether his brother truly meant it. Meghan swallowed hard. looking around to see if anyone might intervene on their behalf. No one moved. Not a performer, not a guest, not an aide, not a single soul, because the room knew something that Harry and Meghan refused to acknowledge. William was in charge. William had authority. William had the right to make the call. And Harry didn't. But Harry wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. Not in front of all these witnesses. Not with Meghan watching him, judging him, expecting him to stand up for her. So he pushed further. "You're seriously going to embarrass us like this?" he demanded. William's reply came instantly. "You embarrassed yourselves by coming here." A sharp, merciless truth, delivered without hesitation. Meghan gasped quietly, as if genuinely stunned that William wasn't bending to their narrative. Harry's face darkened, tension pulsing through him. And here's where things took another unexpected turn. Harry stepped so close to William that security instinctively tightened their formation. Not touching him, not blocking him, but ready. And Harry, with a voice breaking through years of resentment, said, "She's still family." And William, after a long, slow breath, finally looked at Meghan. His expression was unreadable. Cold. No. Cruel? No. But firm. Set. Final. "She was," he said softly. "She chose otherwise." The words hit like lightning. Meghan flinched. Harry inhaled sharply. Several guests exchanged wide-eyed glances, because the finality in William's tone left no room for interpretation, no room for negotiation, no room for pretending bridges still existed where only ruins remained. And then, in that fragile silence, Harry made one more move, almost desperate. He reached for Meghan's hand, a symbolic gesture, a protective one, a defiant one. And that's when William stepped forward, not aggressively, not threateningly, but decisively. Security followed with precise synchronization. And William said something neither Harry nor Meghan expected to hear, something that electrified the air, something that sent a shockwave through the watching crowd, something that made even his aides stiffen. "You need to leave," he said. Harry stared at him. Meghan stared at him. Everyone stared at him. But William wasn't finished. "Both of you." The room erupted in whispers. Harry's face went red. Meghan's eyes widened. And before either of them could react, a voice from outside the main lobby shouted, "Sir, we have a problem. Another car just arrived." Every head turned. Every breath caught. And when the doors swung open, the figure who stepped inside changed the entire night. Who stepped through those doors? Who arrived in that moment when the tension was already stretched so thin that one more unexpected twist could shatter the entire night? The lobby lights reflected off the glass as every pair of eyes swung toward the entrance. Even the security guards, usually stoic, unmoving pillars of protocol, shifted into a defensive stance. William instinctively turned. Harry and Meghan froze mid-breath. Guests leaned forward, necks craning, as if the whole room were pulled by the same invisible force. Because whoever had the nerve to arrive now, unannounced, without clearance, and right in the middle of a royal confrontation, was either extraordinarily brave, extraordinarily foolish, or dangerously determined. And when the figure stepped into the light, a wave of whispers broke across the lobby like a crashing tide. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, the King's sister. The one royal who never tolerated nonsense, who never sugarcoated anything, who never backed down. The woman whose entire reputation was built on discipline, directness, and an intolerance for drama. And who rarely attended the royal variety in recent years due to age and responsibilities, but who had decided, for reasons unknown, to attend this one. And now she was staring at the scene unfolding before her with an expression so sharp it felt like the temperature dropped 3 degrees. And did not walk into rooms. She charged into them, purposeful, quick, eyes assessing everything at once. And as she looked at Meghan, then Harry, then William, then the wall of security, there was no confusion in her face. No shock, no hesitation, only disappointment. The kind of disappointment you can feel even if it isn't directed at you. The kind that makes you straighten your posture, adjust your collar, and wish you were anywhere else. She didn't have to say a word. Her presence alone carved through the chaos like a sword. But of course, and wasn't known for subtlety in moments like this. "What on earth is going on here?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the lobby with unwavering authority. Not a shout, not a request, a command. William stepped forward, automatically falling into protocol as the senior male royal present. Yet even he couldn't hide the shift in power Anne's arrival brought. She wasn't the future monarch. She didn't need to be. She was Anne, the monarchy's enforcer, the one person in the royal family Meghan had always been cautious around. Harry's face flushed. Meghan inhaled sharply. The room seemed to pull inward, compressing around, and as she approached. But here's the real twist, and didn't look at William first. She looked straight at Meghan, and the moment their eyes met, something electric crackled through the air. Meghan straightened, forcing a polite expression, a half-smile, a mask of civility. But Anne's gaze did not soften. It hardened. She examined Meghan the way a general examines a soldier who's broken rank. Then her attention flicked to Harry. No warmth, no greeting, no familial softness. Just steel. "Harry," she said flatly, "you shouldn't be here." Harry swallowed, his throat tightening. "I came with my wife." "That," Anne replied, "is the problem." The bluntness rattled the room. Even William blinked once, surprised by the direct hit, and had no interest in small talk. No interest in diplomacy. She went straight for the truth, the same way she always had. Meghan stepped forward before Harry could respond. "I came to support the performers. This is a public event," and cut her off with a small, sharp laugh that held no humor. "This is not a public event. It is a royal performance. You are not a working royal. You know that." Meghan stiffened as if struck. Harry instantly moved closer to her, and the protective shift didn't go unnoticed by the room. Anne's eyes flicked to his movement, then back to Meghan's. "And even if it were a public event," and continued, "you weren't invited." The words hit like stone. Guests murmured. A performer placed a hand over her mouth. Security kept their eyes forward, but even they seemed affected by the bluntness. Meghan's jaw tightened. "I don't need an invitation to attend a charity performance," and stepped closer, so close that Meghan had no choice but to meet her eyes. "Don't insult me. You didn't come here for charity. You came here for attention, and you chose the wrong night to pull a stunt." That was it. That was the trigger. Meghan tensed, her eyes narrowing, her breathing shallow. But before she could unleash whatever comeback she had been formulating, Harry lifted a hand, not touching and just raising it, like he was trying to physically block the confrontation. "Enough," he said, his voice taut. "We're not here to start a fight," and raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you here at all?" Harry opened his mouth, but no words came. None that wouldn't dig him deeper. None that wouldn't expose the real motive behind their arrival. And Anne knew it. She turned to William. "Why haven't they been escorted out yet?" A hush fell. Meghan's breath caught. Harry's brows shot up. William inhaled slowly. Even the security team shifted, unsure whether they should step in yet. But William didn't rush. He didn't make the call instantly. He held Anne's gaze, communicating 1,000 unspoken tensions. This was no longer a simple removal. This was a historical moment, one that would be analyzed, dissected, replayed for years. Finally, William spoke. "I was handling it," and shook her head. Not fast enough. The way she said it wasn't criticism. It was urgency. She knew something no one else in the room knew yet. You could see it in her eyes. Something deeper was unfolding. Something bigger than a dramatic entrance. And before anyone could question her, she gave a small nod to William's head of security. A signal. A real royal signal. Not the subtle ones William had used earlier. A formal one. A decisive one. Security straightened instantly. Meghan saw it. Harry saw it. The guests saw it. And panic flickered through Meghan's eyes. Not fear, but frustration. Anger. Determination. "Are you seriously doing this?" she snapped. "Are you actually ordering us out?" And stepped closer, lowering her voice so that it was just loud enough for the nearest 20 people to hear. "You are not welcome here." Harry exhaled sharply. "You don't get to decide that," and shot him a look so sharp it could have cut metal. "I outrank you here tonight." And she did. As a working royal. As the king's sister. As someone representing the crown. Harry held no rank in this setting. No authority. No standing. Meghan knew it. Harry knew it. The room knew it. But once again, Meghan pushed. "You can't treat us like criminals," she said, and stared at her. "Stop pretending this is about mistreatment. This is about rules, tradition, respect, all things you abandoned." William finally stepped between them, not siding with Meghan, not shielding, and but because the confrontation had reached a dangerous boiling point. But here's where things turned even darker, and leaned toward William and whispered something that made his entire expression shift. His jaw tightened. His eyes widened a fraction. His breath stilled. No one could hear what she said, but they didn't need the words. They saw the effect. Whatever and whispered wasn't about Meghan's arrival. It was about something bigger, something that made William's next action immediate. He lifted his hand in a firm, unmistakable gesture. Escort them out. Security moved instantly, surrounding Meghan and Harry, not touching them, but blocking every path forward. Meghan's eyes filled with disbelief. Harry's face reddened with humiliation. Guests whispered frantically. Performers watched in stunned silence and stepped back, her face unreadable. William remained still, resolute, prepared to watch them go. But before security could lead Meghan and Harry toward the exit, something happened that no one expected. The companion who had arrived with Meghan, quiet, shadow-like, overlooked, finally stepped forward. And the moment he removed his hood, someone in the crowd gasped loud enough to echo. Because his identity wasn't random. His presence wasn't accidental. His involvement wasn't minor. And the second William saw his face, the color drained slowly from his own. Which raises the question, who was this man? And why did his presence shift the entire energy of the room? The answer would turn the night from chaotic to explosive. Because when the companion finally spoke, he said 4 words that made the entire lobby go silent. I have the letter. And just like that, everything changed. I have the letter. For simple words. But the impact? Nuclear. The entire lobby, hundreds of people, performers, staff, security, royals, guests, fell into a silence so sharp it felt like the air itself froze. Even the orchestra warming up backstage stopped, as if the vibrations of those words traveled through the walls and stunned them too. The companion, previously concealed in the background, now stood fully exposed. Hood down, face visible, posture calm but deliberate. And the moment William saw that face, really saw it, all the color drained from his expression. Meghan saw the reaction. Harry saw it too. And the flicker of triumph that flashed across Meghan's eyes made something instantly clear. She had planned for this moment. She had saved it. She had waited. She had prepared her entrance like a set piece in a theatrical performance, leading to this single dramatic reveal. But here's the twist. She wasn't expecting William to react quite like that. She expected shock, maybe anger, maybe panic. What she didn't expect was the sudden shift in William's posture, a shift from firmness to alertness, from confrontation to calculation. Because this wasn't an ordinary letter. This wasn't a note or message or careless slip of paper. This was something dangerous, something sensitive, something that should have never been outside palace walls. And the person holding it? He wasn't a random bystander. He was James Holt, former communications aide, media strategist, one-time coordinator for the Sussex's PR team, a man who had walked away with knowledge of internal conflicts and communications, a man who had been around during the early stages of Harry and Meghan's royal exit, a man who had access, and now he was here, at a royal event, uninvited, holding a letter with explosive implications, if the rumors surrounding it were true. Anne's eyes widened. Not dramatically, but enough for those who knew her well to see alarm flicker beneath her steady exterior. William's aides leaned in closer, whispering urgently. Security braced themselves, unsure whether this would escalate into a political scandal or a physical security breach. Harry stepped forward, voice low, trying and failing to control the situation. James, not now. Meghan whirled toward him. Now is exactly the time. Meghan's voice rang out, clear, trembling with excitement and panic intertwined. Because when someone courts chaos long enough, they begin to believe they can control it. The crowd looked from Meghan, to Harry, to James, to William, and back to Meghan again. So many questions. What letter? How did he get it? Why bring it here? Why now? And what did Meghan hope this would achieve? James reached into his coat slowly, carefully, knowing any sudden move might send security into full lockdown. He pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, thick, stamped with a seal so unmistakable that even those far in the back recognized it instantly. The royal crest. A letter from someone inside the monarchy, or someone high enough to send tremors through it. William's voice cut through the room like a blade. Where did you get that? James didn't look intimidated, not even slightly. From someone who felt the truth should no longer be hidden. And stiffened. Truth about what? James held the envelope up slightly, not enough to reveal anything, but enough that the room could see it clearly. This, he said, changes the entire story. Meghan smiled, not a soft smile, not a polite smile, but a victorious one. The kind of smile someone gives when they believe they finally have leverage. The kind of smile that says you can't dismiss me now. Harry shifted uneasily, sense of control slipping away. He looked at Meghan, confused, betrayed, alarmed all at once. You told me you weren't going to bring that. Meghan didn't even turn. Plans changed. Did you hear that? Plans changed. A phrase so loaded it could detonate a room. Harry's face darkened, a flash of realization crossing it. He wasn't in control. He wasn't even aware of the full strategy. Meghan had gone rogue. Again. And he was now trapped in her choice, whether he liked it or not. William stepped forward, voice steady but lethal. James, hand the letter to me. James shook his head. Not yet. Not yet. 2 words more dangerous than any accusation. Security moved closer. A subtle repositioning. Preparing for the moment William gave the command. Preparing for the moment the palace reclaimed what belonged to it. But Meghan stepped between James and security, hands slightly raised, protective, defiant. This letter concerns me. You don't get to erase that. William didn't blink. You don't get to weaponize it. The crowd gasped. Because that was the truth Meghan didn't want spoken aloud. Her face hardened. I'm not weaponizing anything. I'm exposing something. And stepped closer, not to Meghan, but to James. Whatever game you think you're playing ends now. James held her gaze. Surprisingly steady. I'm not playing a game. I'm correcting a narrative. William took 1 step closer. A subtle shift, but it changed everything. James, you are in possession of stolen property. Hand it over. Meghan scoffed. Stolen? Please. If the palace didn't want this getting out, maybe they shouldn't have written it. Anne's eyes flared. You have no idea what that letter contains. But Meghan did know. And that was the most frightening part. She knew exactly what was inside. She knew exactly why this letter mattered. And she knew exactly why unveiling it tonight, at the Royal Variety performance, in front of cameras and witnesses, would ignite an international scandal. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that William already suspected the existence of the letter. He had learned about it during that mysterious phone call hours earlier, and he had spent the last 2 hours preparing for this very moment. He just didn't expect it to unfold so publicly. William's voice dropped lower, quieter, more dangerous. Don't do this. The room held its breath. Meghan's voice snapped back, sharp as glass. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. Harry closed his eyes briefly, as if wishing he could turn invisible, wishing the floor would swallow him whole, wishing he wasn't standing in this impossible storm, caught between a wife who wanted to burn the palace from the outside and a brother trying desperately to keep it standing. James lifted the envelope again. Everything you've hidden, he said, is in here. William's jaw locked. Give it to me. James opened the flap. Security surged forward instinctively, but William raised a single hand, halting them. Because he needed to hear what came next. He needed to know how deep this went. He needed to see whether this was a bluff or an exposure. James pulled out the letter slowly, dramatically, like he'd rehearsed. Meghan leaned forward, eyes shining. Harry looked like he might faint, and looked ready to grab the letter with her bare hands if she had to. And then James began reading. But as soon as the first 2 words left his mouth, and gasped, William's face froze. Harry swore under his breath. And Meghan, who expected triumph, went absolutely still. Because the letter didn't begin with an accusation. It didn't begin with a confession. It didn't begin with anything Meghan had anticipated. The letter began with, Dear William. Meghan's smile collapsed. Harry's eyes widened. William's heart pounded visibly in his throat. A letter addressed to William. Not to Harry. Not to Meghan. Not about them. To William. From someone powerful enough that, and recognized the handwriting instantly. And before James could read another word. And lunged forward, grabbing his wrist with a speed no one expected from a woman her age. James flinched. Meghan screamed. Security moved. And over the chaos, and shouted. Stop. You have no idea what that letter is about. But it was too late. Because Meghan, desperate, frantic, snatched the letter from James's other hand. She scanned the first line, then the second, then the third, and her face went pale. Not shocked, not triumphant, not horrified. Pale, like someone who has just realized they opened a door they can't close. A door that wasn't meant for them. A door that carried consequences no one warned them about. William watched her, silent, steady, unblinking, waiting for the moment she understood the truth. This letter wasn't a weapon against the monarchy. It was a warning from inside the family. A warning meant for William alone. A warning that Meghan was never supposed to see. And as Meghan slowly lifted her eyes from the page, trembling, speechless, shaken to her core, the room waited for her to speak. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "Oh my God, this is about him." The lobby erupted into questions. Who? Who did she mean? Who was the him she was referring to? But before anyone could process it, before anyone could take the letter from her hand, a deep voice echoed from the entrance behind them. Put the letter down. Every head turned, and standing in the doorway was the last person anyone expected to appear tonight. Who was standing in the doorway? Who had a voice deep enough, authoritative enough, commanding enough to stop the lobby's chaos with a single sentence? Every head turned toward the entrance, hearts pounding, breath suspended, as the figure stepped out of the shadows and into the golden light of the Royal Albert Hall foyer. And when his face came into view, the reaction was immediate. Gasps, a dropped program booklet, a performer whispering "no way." Guests stumbling back as if the air had suddenly thickened around them. Because the man standing there, the man who had just ordered Meghan to put the letter down, was none other than Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, the King's youngest brother, the quiet one, the disciplined one, the man who rarely inserted himself into royal family conflicts, but, when he did, it meant something had gone horribly, dangerously wrong. A man who had spent years silently managing internal crises behind the scenes, far away from cameras, chaos, or confrontation. And tonight, he was here, unannounced, unexpected, unsmiling. Edward's appearance shifted the atmosphere instantly. He wasn't as stern as Anne, nor as publicly commanding as William, but he carried a kind of calm authority that demanded attention. He had the presence of someone who walked into burning rooms not to panic, but to extinguish the flames. And right now? Flames were everywhere. Meghan froze, the letter trembling in her grip. Harry stiffened, his face draining of color. William's expression shifted, still calm, but now tinged with something new, guarded recognition, and released James's wrist, stepping back, eyes narrowing as if she had suspected Edward might appear, but not this soon. Edward's gaze locked on Meghan with surgical precision. Put the letter down. Not loud, not emotional, just absolute. Meghan hesitated. The entire room watched her fingers tremble. You could practically hear her pulse in the silence. Harry whispered urgently, "Meg, give it to him." But Meghan didn't move. Why? Because for the first time that night, she was afraid. Not afraid of being escorted out. Not afraid of public humiliation, but afraid of the weight behind Edward's words, because she could finally sense it. This letter wasn't hers. It wasn't a bargaining chip. It wasn't ammunition in her fight. It was something far more dangerous. Edward stepped further into the lobby, the doors closing silently behind him. "You do not understand what you are holding," he said. "You do not understand the consequences." His voice carried a gravity that made even security step back a fraction. Meghan swallowed hard. "It's about him," she repeated, her voice thin. Edward's eyes narrowed. "You are not authorized to know who him refers to." Meghan blinked rapidly, confusion swirling with fear. "But the letter," it said. Edward held up a hand. "Enough." That one word silenced her. Silenced everybody. Then he turned to William, to security. "We need the room cleared. Now." Security sprang into action instantly, escorting stunned guests back toward the main hall. Performers were guided backstage. Staff were pushed to side corridors. Royal aides moved to form a protective circle around the core group. Within seconds, the once bustling lobby was transformed into an almost private arena. Only the key players remained. Meghan, Harry, William, Anne, James, Edward, and a handful of top-level security officers. The tension was suffocating. Edward approached Meghan slowly, as if approaching someone holding a live explosive. Give me the letter. Meghan exhaled shakily. If it's so important, why didn't he tell anyone? Why didn't you say anything? Edward's jaw clenched. Because it was meant for William. And only William. Harry looked sharply at his brother, shock flooding his face. What? For you? William swallowed once, his expression unreadable. Meghan looked between them, sensing the shift. So you all knew? All of you. But not us. Edward's eyes burned. You are not entitled to royal correspondences. Meghan's voice rose. If this is about him. Edward stepped forward sharply, making her flinch. Stop saying that. Harry moved between them protectively. Don't talk to her like that. Edward stared at him coldly. I will speak how I must. Harry tensed, but Edward didn't acknowledge the simmering anger. His focus remained laser-sharp on the envelope slowly crumpling in Meghan's trembling hands. Meghan, he said, voice softer now, but far more dangerous. If you understood even a fraction of what that letter contains, you would not be standing here. Meghan's voice dropped to a whisper. I saw the name. The room froze. And inhaled. William went rigid. Harry clenched his fists. Edward's eyes narrowed to slits. You think you saw the name? Meghan's face paled further. So it is him. Harry grabbed her arm as if trying to stop her from saying more. But Edward straightened, his voice shifting to an official tone that made the hair on the back of everyone's neck stand up. That information, he said, is classified at the highest level. And it was classified to protect someone who